So that was for your listening pleasure. That is Michael Jackson's famous song called PYT, Pretty Young Thing. Now, you may ask what this has to do with math. Well, I'll kind of try to help you make that connection. Um, Instead of Michael Jackson's PYT, we're going to think about PRT. Um, and that these three letters will represent something in an equation. So if we look at this, we see that we have I represents interest. And many times you may hear your parents talking about how they would like a lower interest rate and may refinance on their house because they want to get a better rate, okay, interest rate. Principal is, well, interest, first of all, is the amount. Banks aren't just going to let you borrow money without charging you interest. You're going to have to pay a certain percentage of that amount on top of what you're already paying. So your principal could also be considered the amount of money either being borrowed or saved. A lot of times, if you have money in savings, the banks will give you money on top of that if you save it instead of spending it. Your rate is a percentage that will need to be converted into a decimal. And your time is, well, that's the easiest one probably, just the amount of time that you're either taking your loan out or you're putting something into savings for. So it needs to be written and figured in the equation in years. So for example, if you had 6 months, that's half of a year, so you would represent that as half of a year. So down below we have $580 in a savings account. So that means we're saving money. We're going to have some interest that we will add on top of that savings account after so many years if we don't spend any of it. So if we were going to follow this equation, I'm just going to plug in the numbers that I know. Well, we know that the principal amount is the amount of money, that's this. So that's going to be here, 580. And I'm going to erase that because that just made everything hard to read. So 580, we're going to say we don't know the interest yet, but we know that the principal is 580. We know that the rate, and again that's going to be written as a percent, 3%, but that needs to be a decimal. So if we were going to write that as a decimal, we know that it is going to be written as 0.03. And we're going to times that all by time. And we have our time there. So we're going to times that by 5. So if we did that, we could get a calculator. I'm going to do that really quickly and would encourage you. In fact, I'm going to pause right here and want you to pause and figure out this answer. 580 times 0.03 times 5. All right, so if you figured that out, you should have 87. So that would mean in 5 years you will have earned $87 in interest, okay? So if we added that onto the 580, we would be over $650, $657 is what we would have in our savings account, okay? So we would need to figure out in 6 months, what would that look like? Well, we can plug in everything in the exact same way. We have our same principal amount. So we would say interest is equal to 580. Whoops. I'm not doing so hot here. Okay. 580 times same interest rate, written as a decimal. And this time, in 6 months, we need to represent that as a year. So 6 months is half of a year, so we would say 0.5, because that represents 1/2. So then we would go ahead and use our trusty calculator, 580 times 0.03 times 0.5. And we know that we would get the answer of 8.7. but that doesn't make much sense in a money amount. So of course we would know that we would need to add on a zero, and that would be $8.70. So in 6 months, so then we could go from there and say, well, if that's 6 months in a year, that will be 16 plus $1.40, so $17.40 in interest after 1 year. And if you times $17.40 by 5, you would get $87, okay? Let's go ahead, and in the next equation, we're going to kind of work backward because we don't know the interest rate. So if you don't remember, the interest rate is represented by the R up there. I'm going to use a different color. So with our interest rate, we're going to set up the equation the same way. So our interest, well, our car loan is $5,000. Our interest, it tells us what our I is. So we know it's $300. So we're going to plug that in for the I, is equal to, well, we know P is this amount, the 5,000. So 5,000 times, we don't know the rate, right? But we know the time, which is 2 years. Okay. Well, we know 5,000 times 2 is 10,000. So we have 10,000. R is equal to 300. And then we would go ahead and divide each side by 10,000 to get rid of that. And that would cancel out. We would have 300 divided by 10,000. And I'm going to do that. And I should know this already, but we're going to get, of course, 0.03, which, if you think about it, that is 3%. So that would be a 3% rate. Okay. Let's move along to our assignment. So we're going to, again, remember that we have, and maybe I need to do the green this time, interest is equal to, instead of PYT, it's PRT. So interest, we don't have the interest. It says find the simple interest earned to the nearest cent for each principal, interest rate, and time. So the interest, we have the principal amount, that's this. So we know that our interest is going to be $7.50 times the percent, or the rate, which is 0.07 as a decimal, times the years. And if we figure that out on our calculator, we would have 750 times 0.07 times 3. And that would give us 157.5. I'll kind of have to write this down here. Which, a money amount, that would be $157.50. So that would be the interest that we would be paying, or on top of the 750, or earning on top of the 750. Okay. Let's go down to number 6 because that's kind of a tricky one. I wish I had more colors. I don't know why I don't have more colors. All right, so we're going to go to number 6, and it says we're just going to plug it into our formula, right? So it's 600 times, what is 8% as a decimal? 0.08 times by the number of years. Now we've got to think about this. How much is 1 month of the year? Well, it's 1/12. So you could say it's 1/12 of a year because there's 12 months in 1 year. So we could times that by 1/12. So in our calculator, we could do the following. You could just multiply 600 times 0.08 times 1 over 12, or 1 ABC 12. And you should get an answer of 4. So what does that mean? That means in 1 month you will pay $4, or you will earn $4 on top of that $600 amount. Okay? All right. All right, let's go ahead and do number 13 together at the bottom of page, And sorry, I didn't tell you this in the beginning. At the bottom of page, I guess it's 85. Problem number 13, I guess it's the middle of the page. But let's go over this example here. Electronics. Rita charged $126 for a DVD player at an interest rate of 15.9%. How much will Rita have to pay after 2 months if she makes no payments? Okay, so here's our principal, here's our rate, and our time. Okay, now remember, it has to be represented in year amounts. So how much is 2 months out of a year? Well, that's 2/12 or 1/6, right? So we're going to have to use 1/6 when we multiply our amounts here. So interest, you would have your principal, 126, times, now remember it has to be written as a decimal, so it's going to be 0.159 times 1/6. Okay, and go ahead and multiply that on your calculator. 126 times 0.159 times 1 ABC6 equals 3.339. So we would probably have to round that to the nearest, I mean, if you think about it, what is going to make sense? We'll round to the nearest hundredth to make it a money amount. And that will go up to a 4 because there is a 9 to the right of the 3. So it would be 3.34. This is how much will Rita have to pay after 2 months if she makes no payments. So we would have to add that onto our principal amount. So that would make it 129.34. Okay. And if you turn to the next page, which is page 38, again, just some more practice. Just I quickly set this up for you, remembering that formula PRT. So principal times rate times time. Principal times rate times time. Now remember, if it's like this, you're going to have to write it as a decimal, which is if I can write a decimal here, 0.062, right? What is this one going to be? 0.043. You'll get the idea there. So half the problem or the battle is going to be looking at that percent and changing it to a decimal to plug it into the equation. Okay. Last one again, same. I think these ones are actually even easier. So remember, interest equals principal times rate times time. 800 times 0.09 times 4. So those ones are pretty easy. Good luck to you. May the force be with you. And remember, I equals PRT.